Welcome to another episode of Eric Wade Whiskey Studies, and in this series I'm sharing whiskeys that I picked up at distilleries during my tour of Texas in September 2019. I'm going to be reviewing in this video the Andalusia Revenant Oak Peated Single Malt Scotch Whiskey bottled at 50% alcohol by volume. But before I get into this, here are my notes. Revenant Oak is a peated single malt that is crafted from 100% malted barley and steeped in authentic dead bourbon barrels that are brought back to life. Traditionally produced in the spirit of great Scotch whiskies, Revenant Oak is infused with a hint of peat smoke that finishes with a smooth and refined character. It's bottled at 50% alcohol by volume, 100 proof, and retails for about $50 in the United States. Now, if you're wondering, where are they getting peat in Texas? Well, the peat is actually imported from Ireland. And I learned that from the head distiller, Ty Phelps, who will be in an upcoming video. Now, when you hear peated whiskey, you might think Ardbeg or something else from Islay. Or perhaps Highland Park comes to your mind. Or perhaps even a Highland or a Speyside whiskey that's peated, such as Caboken. But the Andalusia Revenant Oak peated whiskey is very, very different than any Scottish Island or Highland peat whiskey. As I've been sort of thinking about it and sort of running through my mind the various places I've been in Scotland and various whiskeys I've had, even say like an Irish peated whiskey like Connemara. In fact, the peat for Revenant Oak actually comes from Ireland. I couldn't find anything that really correlates to this. So if anybody says it reminds them of, something from Islay, I would like to sit down with them and take a Lagavulin, a Laphroaig, an Ardbeg, an Octomore from Bruichladdich, or maybe even a Bunnahabhain, go side by side with the Revenant Oak and just show them, no, it is nowhere near in flavor profile or aromas anything like any of those peated whiskeys. So what is it like? Well, first of all, take a look at it. It's golden in color. The smoke on the peat on it is not oceanic. It's not briny. It's not medicinal. So all that sort of sets aside any of the typical Islay, particularly Southern Islay distillery notes. It doesn't have that chocolate character and that sort of interwoven smoke notes that you get from, say, Orkney, from Highland Park. Now, peat is essentially organic matter that has not fully decomposed and has a lot of organic matter in it and a lot of carbon elements, and it gives off a lot of CO2. So it's not quite just regular dirt, right? Because you take a cloud of dirt and earth, it's not going to burn, whereas peat burns. But there is a peat that this reminds me of, and it's not in Scotland, it's not in Ireland, it's actually in Australia. This is a Lark single malt whiskey, single cask, bottled at 43% alcohol by volume. I've already reviewed this. This was a gift from Tom R. I have another cask strength one as well. This is Tasmanian or Australian whiskey. And the closest thing that I could come to on this was this whiskey. However, it is very, very different. But for the sake of comparison, I want to do these side by side. So I get a distinctive smoke, but also a lot of spice. Caramels. Get more of a toffee note. Apples with a little bit of cinnamon on it. More of a burning hay note on the palate. Intensely spicy. A lot of toffee, caramels. The whiskey is dry. It has some honeyed notes to it, but it's not like real sweet. There's almost like a hazelnut note to it. Now, the name Revenant has to do with the fact that they're not using a new oak, and they're using the whiskey to bring the oak sort of back to life. So, like Scotland, they're not using brand new oak. Now, let's do a side-by-side with the Lark. Now, the problem with doing this comparison for most of my viewers is it's Tasmanian, it's from Australia, it's very, very difficult to get. This, in fact, I've never seen this in California where I live. This was a gift, but it was picked up, I believe, at a whiskey shop in Chicago. So if you can get a bottle, I highly, highly recommend it. Now, visually, if you can see that, very, very, very similar. Very, very similar in color. On the nose, similar profile, but the Lark is sweeter on the nose, more candy-like, more like a honeyed caramel candy. It's not as smoky, but the Lark is made with a Tasmanian peat. It's something that's about as hard to describe. There is a hazelnut note on the Lark. There is, but it's like a hazelnut candy. There's definitely a honey note in there. There's some florals, I would say, also on both of these. This has a slight yellow grass hay note to it, and a little bit of, actually, just a little bit of a saltiness to it as well, almost like salty light caramels on the palate. These two whiskeys are very similar in terms of the fruit, the honey, the smoke, the caramels, and all these profiles. The primary difference is the Lark is like a lot sweeter, a lot sweeter. It's lower in ABV, so there's a little bit more of a bite, although it's still fairly smooth. The Revenant oak, because the Revenant's at 50%. On the finish, they become much more like, because the sweetness of the Lark starts to dissipate. Alrighty, I love both of these whiskeys. Now, what am I going to give the Revenant Oak as a score? I'm going to go 90 points. 90 points. I gave the Striker in a previous video, I gave it 92 points. So I like that one a little bit more. But still absolutely fantastic whiskeys. It's an interesting look at two different whiskeys, two different places in the world. Climatically could be similar in terms of, the heat, temperatures, and so forth. Both using a peat. Of course, Revenant Oak is using an Irish peat, whereas Lark is using a Tasmanian peat, but still coming to very similar notes. The primary difference is, I think, if you were to bump up the ABV with the Lark and reduce the sweetness just a little bit, it would be very similar to the Revenant Oak. Both are very, very, very nice. Similar, if you wanted to recommend someone a whiskey with these profiles and just ask them, do you want it before dinner or after dinner, or do you want something, a little bit of sweetness to it or not? These are just similar profiles. You want someone who doesn't like, heavy iodine, oceanic, peat, as they think of peat, in terms of the islands of Scotland. But you want to give them something that's got a little more of an earthy character to it, grass and hay, and a slight little that candied hazelnut note. Both of these would work really, really, really well. I really like the Revenant Oak, really like the Lark. So distinct and reflective of where they're from, even though the Revenant Oak is using peat from Ireland. If you go on Google, search peat, you can actually buy a block of peat from Ireland and have it sent to you, and you could peat whatever it is you wanted to peat. But what this reflects is not just the peat that's used in the whiskey in terms of for the barley, but the climate as well, the barrel choices, and the brewing process for making the mash. Ty Phelps being a former brewer, bringing his hand in there and bringing that style to it as well. Because it does it does have a slight brewer's signature to it as well, but absolutely fantastic whiskey. Alrighty, that's it for this review. If you subscribe to this channel, I want to thank you very much. I have one more video on Andalusia coming up. I did an interview with Ty Phelps. It'll premiere 2 days after this post. So if you're watching this after it's already posted, then watch it on the replay. It's about an hour-long interview, and we get super geeky in the conversation. I think you'll really, really, really like it. All right, until next time, cheers. Hey, don't forget to subscribe and check out these other whiskey videos.